All right. Well, first I must apologize because of copyright reasons. The audio has been replaced by MIDI files, which doesn't sound great, but you still get the idea. So, here's the trailer for K-On! After School Live.
せーかー軽音放課後ライブ
All right. Don't worry about getting the link now. I'll display it at the end of the presentation as well. But yeah, that's the trailer for the translation project I've been working on for, well, the past 3 years now. I'll switch back to the presentation itself. So, firstly, you might have seen it in the trailer already, but what is K-On! After School Live? It's a rhythm game for, well, the PSP, obviously. It's also for the PS3, but the PS3 version is basically just the PSP version in a new coat of paint with higher quality textures, but the executable is still a PSP game. It's based on, as you might have guessed from the name, the K-On! Anime, which is also based on music, so it comes as no surprise that it's a rhythm game. This project has been a long time in the making. It started all the way back in 2020, as you can see from the screenshot, and initially, I didn't have any intent to translate it at all. Yaladre came to me originally, asking like if I could help him edit the rhythm game sections in the game, right? Add new songs, different songs, stuff like that. So it looked like a fun project, and I started on that. And then I spent like 1.5 years just every now and then working on it, reverse engineering all the files, and eventually someone came to me like, "Oh, what are you going to do with all that work?" And you're going to make an English translation for it. And that's basically when I decided, oh yeah, I am going to make an English translation for it. Now, it's been almost 13 years now, I think, since the game has been released. And in that time, no, we're not the first ones to translate it. There have been, I know of at least one PPSSTP texture pack for the game. What a texture pack is in this case is um, the emulator looks at all the textures loaded into memory, and if the hash of a texture matches one in the pack, it'll replace it with the texture from the pack, which is really cool and a pretty low barrier to entry way to change textures in a game. But it has its limitations because if, say, we use a font texture and then we take the first character from that and the third character and then put them in a row, we can't just replace the text. We need to replace the character. But if we do that with a different language, then if it might say ABC, or we use the Japanese characters for that, right? If it says that, we can replace the font with the alphabet. But what it says there will still be Japanese. So in that sense, we cannot really translate it. So what our translation does is it takes the ISO file, completely unpacks all of the files into common formats like PNG, TXT, stuff like that. And then we apply an edit to that TXT file, PNG file, and then we pack the game back into the ISO file. So we modify the game at the file level, which allows us to add full event translation of the over 50 events that are in the game, some of which are directly from the anime, others are original or tutorials and stuff like that. We have full menu translation, so not just the big buttons on the main menu, but also all of the outfits and stuff like that. And, which is the most important one for me, it's a rhythm game. Delay is really bad. It really hurts the experience. So we can play this now on real hardware, which is honestly the biggest feature that I like about it. Now, all of that is not easy because otherwise everyone would be doing it. This game has, well, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that this game has a dozen custom formats, which are formats used in either only this game or maybe like 2 or 3 games from Sega. But I only know that these formats are used in this game specifically. It has several archive layers. You should think of those as like zip files, but proprietary. And they're all different. So it's a whole big mess to get that done. And then once you get through those archives, you've got proprietary bytecode for events. So it's kind of like compiled code, but for managing how events play out and where the text gets displayed and where the characters move and all that. And then there's 3 text renderers, 3 different ways that the game uses to render text. And for all of them, I have to write tools to manage that and unpack it, pack it back in, stuff like that. It's a lot of work, but it's also quite fun. But that's why it's taken so long to do all of this. But then about that patch, how is that managed? Well, there's 2 steps in the process, really. The first step, you don't have to do. That happens at my computer, and that is generating the patch. I just have on my hard drive a folder with a bunch of GIMP files, PSD files, and Python scripts, and also TXT files with the events. And using Python scripts, right, we can use GIMP's awesome interface to do all kinds of operations. So we have a system where we don't want to use any copyrighted content from the game. So we only add, or replace rather, the parts that need to be translated. So in GIMP, I have a layer called the mask layer. And then what the Python script does is it basically cuts out everything else from the image and only gets the part that needs to be replaced. And then the text generators as well to generate the events. Those are also in that first step. Now, the second step, which is what you'll be using if you're running the installer, more on that later, is that I wrote a tool called TTime Tools for that, which is written in C++, and it uses Lua for scripting. And this is the program that will fully unpack your game, change everything up, and then pack it back into the ISO file. And the cool thing about this method of doing things right, unpacking it and packing it back in, is that it allows you to just decide, I don't want this part to be translated, or say you're used to switch buttons, right, where the X button is at the top instead of the bottom. And this is the only rhythm game that you play on your PSP, so it's really confusing when you switch between the two. What you could do with this method is simply have an option like replace the PSP buttons, but then like put the switch buttons in there instead, and then the rest of the patch will still be the same. You can just change that one part, and it will still patch within a few minutes. You don't have to download anything else, and that's what I really like about it. So you can really customize your game just the way you want it. But that comes with a dilemma, because there's three major things that I would have liked this translation to have. Firstly, that's a hard rule: no piracy. Anyone should be able to download the patch, apply it to their game, the one they already own, without having to download anything, any copyrighted content, because I can't host it anywhere if that's the case. Secondly, no executable to run, because ideally you wouldn't have to run a random executable file that I sent you, right? It's not that great. And thirdly, no large files. Why that is, we'll see later, but ideally you'd keep it as small as possible. Unfortunately, due to how everything's been managed, I can only use two of the above at the same time. So instead of giving up on one of them, I just give you two options. Both of them don't have piracy, but one of them is, an executable file, and the other is a large file. So what the installer does, which I mentioned a bit back, is this is the program that has the T-Time tools in it and lets you customize all of the individual parts. Downside is it has to run an executable to do that. And it also only works on Windows and Linux, because I don't have a Mac. I don't really think it's that easy to get working on Android, and especially not on iOS. So those platforms are out for this. But it has a very small footprint, 60 megabytes, and indeed you can disable or enable specific parts. The second option, which is great for if you don't have Windows and Linux or you don't trust me, is the XDelta method. This is a large file, 800 megabytes, which is not really anyone's fault. It's just due to how XDelta works. It looks for changes between the original file and the changed file, but because the game is completely unpacked and repacked, the small differences between how it's compressed and how the files are laid out means that it cannot really get a good mapping between the two. So it's a very large file. That will always have the entire patch, and there's no options, so it's always the default options you'd get, which is a bit sad, but oh well. The biggest upside of this is you can run it on any platform that has an XDelta patcher. So Mac, I haven't looked into it, but I believe Android has one as well. So if you don't have access to a Windows or Linux machine, you'll still be able to apply the patch yourself. That doesn't mean that the translation's done now. In the short term, I'd like to work on adding customizability. Like, for example, those switch buttons or Xbox buttons, stuff like that is not in the game yet. The original goal of this entire endeavor, which was to have a chart editor, that's not here yet. So I'd like to add that one as well. And something I would have loved to do for the presentation, but just simply didn't have time to do, is to document some of the formats in video form, using nice explanations on how the formats work internally and stuff like that. Because I think that would be really great for people looking to learn how to get into reverse engineering. And long term, a full song editor, that would be a great thing to have, but it requires a lot of extra reverse engineering work, which I'm not sure I have the time for at the moment. So yeah, long term. And that's one thing I haven't mentioned yet. Unfortunately, there are 3 menu pop-ups, only 3, which have not been translated. because the game uses a fourth way of rendering text, which I simply cannot change using just the files. I would need to dive deep into the executable of the game, which I have done, but simply not been able to find anything. Um, it, it uses the executable of the game to individually pick out characters in those menus uh, to place on the thing. So I cannot change that via the files, which is unfortunate, but should be fixable in the future. That's about everything I have. Here's a list of everyone who's worked on the project. Well, I started with it, and then later, Wonder came up to me and asked to help with the texture editing. So he's done most of the texture edits you'd see. He also translated some of them, and yeah, all the menu edits are his. Secondly, King Sizzle joined. He's done pretty much all of the events. He made the trailer you saw a bit at the start of this presentation, and some minor edits as well. And then Quacker Cats has playtested the game a bunch, so I'd like to thank him as well. And that's all I have for you today. Grab the game if it interests you, or just, talk about it. If you have any issues, you can join the Discord, and I'll be happy to help you tomorrow after I sleep. So, yeah, thanks for listening. Are there any questions?
Let's see. Yeah. Well, sorry, I was letting the chat catch up for a bit. But yeah, if you have any, go ahead.
Yeah. So the first one is the system open source by K Origami K? I believe it's referring to the patching and translation system that you were describing earlier in your slides.
The Tea Time Tools program that I used or made for this, yes, that is open source. You can grab that. I'll be happy to help as well. I should have mentioned this actually, but if there's interest in translating the game to other languages, it's now a lot easier because all of the reverse engineering has been done. So yeah, that's definitely possible. And you can grab, it's on my GitHub under github.com/framebreeze/teatimetools or something. But yeah, you should be able to find it from my profile.
Nice. Another question we have here is, does this work on the disc version from Trilkira?
The disc version, as in, well, no. You need to basically copy the game off your PSP right to your computer, change it, and then put it on your memory stick. I haven't found out how to decrypt the file they use like to install to the memory stick. So unfortunately, you'll need to have the entire game on your memory stick to play it.
All right.
But
yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's a lot faster if you're on most memory sticks, anyways. Especially if you have like an SD to memory stick adapter. That's way faster. So yeah.
We had a comment here from Claude about that was just saying I really like that you had the two different options, the referring to the installer and the X Delta.
Oh yeah, I've noticed that in the past. It's not really a problem for me anymore, but well, I just like to have some more options when it comes to that. Sometimes you don't quite like the default settings they have, and it's great to be able to customize the game a bit.
PSP Homebrew asks, where can I download? I believe you're seeing the link on your screen right now at framebreeze.github.
Go to frame-breeze.github.io/kaon, and you'll see a nice site with tutorial videos, written tutorial guides as well, and the downloads you need for the installer and the XDelta files.
Hey, Origami K asks, can this be used to patch any game that is not Kaon?
No. No. This is very specifically for Kaon. There are some more common formats. For example, the ISO format. Yes, you'll be able to unpack any ISO game with this, but the formats inside the ISO file, not all of them. I have implemented ISO and CPK. Those are very common on PSP games, but the other formats are pretty much just specific to K-On! So any other games would be pretty tough.
All right. I think Slendy asked, is it possible to burn this onto CD? And I think I'll answer this. Probably not, because UMD burners are exceedingly rare to come across. And if you have one, I think a lot of people would be interested. But unfortunately,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
If you manage to get that working, please do get in touch, because I'd love to see that. But yeah.
Slistrel asks, what game is next to be translated? Do you have any future plans, I guess?
That's a good one. I've looked into, well, during the time that I was actually looking or working on this game, I originally had the idea to translate the Lucky Star game, the visual novel for it, but that's already been done by someone else in the time it took me to do this game. So maybe Space Fisherman for the PS2.
Okay. And then Julio Uribe, sorry if I butchered your name, said that you mentioned a reverse engineering guide you were planning on making. Should we expect something like this to be published somewhere else, or where would you put this?
I would probably put that on my YouTube channel as, videos for. I will probably also update the site to add them, but you won't get any notification from that. Specifically, a reverse engineering guide for like how I managed or how I got the formats in this game to work. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, then my YouTube should be linked on. Wait, actually, it's not linked on the site. I'll add that after the event. Yeah.
All right. And I think we have one last question here. Hey, Frame Breeze, if you could describe the entire translation in one word, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'd probably say it's It's a good word for that. I don't know. I'll just keep it basic. I think it was pretty fun. Yeah.
All right.
Pretty fun.
Oh, those are two words. Sorry. Fun. Yes, there you go.
Fun. Yeah. Talking about the UMD burners, don't you think, guys, that it's weird that nobody still did this?
Yeah, where have they gone?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good idea for the project to make a UMD burner. It's been like 30 years or something, 2030, that UMD and
remember
PSPs
seeing
existed.
I remember seeing the document for the UMD specs, and it uses like, what was it, like 600 nanometers instead of the CD's 500 or something like that. So you'd have to basically order a bunch of special made discs from a factory somewhere. I don't think anyone really had the money or the interest to get that money to do that. But it would definitely be a great project if that managed to get done.
Yeah, we need a one hero that will just manage, just contain all the money to get these things and make a big project.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead. Thank you for presenting.
All right.